Well, hello. Thanks for coming back to check out another video. So if you were unaware that Haley is a flaky person, this is your introduction into that, because if you will recall in my tracking my palettes throughout the year introduction video, I believe I said I'm not going to declutter any eyeshadow palettes this year until the end of the year. And in theory, I think that's a good idea. That way you make sure that you're not just getting rid of something because you know, maybe just at that moment aren't in love with it. What I have realized though is that I actually have palettes where I really don't like them, and I have dupe palettes of them, and so I don't feel the need to continue to have these into my life. So all of these palettes, with the exception of two, have a good home to go to. Two of them unfortunately are old and they are causing irritation on my eyes, and so they are going to get decluttered into the bin. But I just thought I would share with you guys the palettes that are getting decluttered, and then I do have a few where they're like on a chopping block, we'll say. Like I really want to take the time to test them out and mess around with them and see, like, do I actually really like these and need these? So if that sounds interesting to you, I have this basket to go over with you, and we will get right on into it. Okay, so let's just get the two out of the way that are unfortunately going to go into the bin. There's nothing inherently wrong with these palettes. It's just when I have used them, my eyes have gotten red and itchy and kind of like very watery and not really swollen but tender. So I'm not fooling with that anymore. Like, my eyes are already bad enough off. Like, I don't need to actually lose one because I'm using expired makeup. So I'm going to first get rid of my Lorac Pro 4 palette. This one pains me because it's so pretty. It's just a berry palette, and it's, you guys know how I feel about Lorac and berry shades, so this does pain me a little bit. I believe my mom picked this up at a TJ Maxx, so honestly, there's really no telling how old this is. I've had fun with it while I have used it, even though there is no pan in it. But like I said, it's just getting so old that I just need to, you know, toss it instead of causing myself a reaction. So the other one is from ColourPop. This is the Good Sport palette. I was gifted this from my cousin, and again, this is a really pretty, like, berry toned fall-esque palette. I've enjoyed most of the looks that I've done when I've created, or when I've sat down and used this palette. There are a few shades in here, like these two kind of more gray shades that I just don't jive with. But every time I use it, again, my eyes get some type of irritation going on, and this too is an older palette. So yeah, I just don't want to fool around with these and have any like risk like that. So unfortunately, they're going to get decluttered into the bin, but I feel a lot better like letting them go. You know what I mean? Like, they're not just sitting here hovering over me like, oh, you didn't use this before we expired. All right, so let's get into palettes that have a very good home to go to. So the first one is the Kaleidos palette. It is the Futurism 5, the Electro Turquoise. Now I do have to tell you, I'm going to pop out my two favorite shades from in this palette. They are the two shimmer shades, the blue and the silver, which is Tron and Shockwave. The matte shades, they're not bad. I like the Kaleidos formula. However, just this palette has never really done it for me. Like, I don't like the color story of it. I like these shadows individually, and you might be sitting there thinking like, well, just pop them all out and put them all into your singles collection. But when I pop shadows out and put them into my singles collection, they go there to die. Like, I'm just going to be real with you. So I don't want to, I just want to take out my favorite shades. The two that I know I have a chance for reaching for, like I said, those are the two shimmer shades. The matte shadows within this palette, it's a dark brown, a dark blue, a matte orange, and then a matte kind of pastel blue. I have those in other palettes represented across my collection. The shimmer shades are what are unique about this palette, so I'm just going to pop those out and then pass this palette, just the matte shades, onto someone else. All right, I have 4 Juvia's Place palettes. So the first two are their 6-pan palettes. This is the I Live, I Love Ice. I keep saying I Live, I Love, I Ice, but this is what this one looks like. This was a holiday release for them. This has a pressed glitter. You guys know how I feel about that. And then this is a bunch of samey blues. I just don't like it. I feel like, so one, it's a 5-pan palette to me because I don't use the pressed glitter. So it's a monochromatic palette, and they all look the same. Like, I just don't need it. I don't like it. It's not my, this is not the blue palette that I'm going to reach for. I will reach for my ColourPop. I will reach for my Menagerie. I will reach for my BH Cosmetics palettes over and over before I reach for this one. And it's kind of the same deal with this Blushed Rose, this 6-pan palette. So the color story of this Blushed Rose one is much more pretty. Like, I do have to give you Okay, nothing broke, so that's good. Don't hold more than 2 palettes in your hands at once. Here's what the Blushed Rose palette looks like on the inside. This is a very pretty, like soft, romantic kind of eyeshadow palette, but it really just breaks down to the formula. I do not like the formula of these 6-pan palettes. I feel like they're different from their other palettes than what you get. The shimmers are dry, the mattes are dry. I just don't enjoy using them. And like I said, I don't like a big palette. Like I don't want like 30 plus shades, but I definitely feel like I want more than 6. Like I get quite bored of this palette quite easily. And even though it looks like this shade in the corner is pretty dark, it's not. It is not as deep and dark as I personally want for like my outer V and things like that. So I'm quite happy to let this one go, pass it along to someone else who's going to get a lot more use out of it than I do. So these next two are also from Juvia's Place. These are their 9-pan palettes. I like the formula of these. That has nothing to do with why I want to get rid of them. The reason I want to get rid of them is because I took pictures for you. I can dupe these palettes out perfectly within my collection. So the first one we will talk about is the Saharan 2. I will open it up and show it to you. I feel like this is a lot of people's favorite palette, and I want it to be one of my favorite palettes, but it just never is. Now, a big complaint that I have is that these 3 shadows down here are very pretty matte shadows, but they never translate like they are in the pan onto my eyes. And within my ColourPop Sonic Bloom palette, I'm scooting over so that you can hopefully see the picture. Within my ColourPop Sonic Bloom palette, those 3 shadows are in there. Now, on the swatches, they look like spot-on dupes, but I'm not lying to you guys. These Juvia's Place ones are a bit misleading, especially this berry toned in the center. This comes across much more of like a magenta pink, and it just always makes me look faintly sickly, you know. But the ColourPop Sonic Bloom shadows, they don't do that. They look very much true to pan, like true to what you're seeing in color, and so I'm much more likely to reach for that palette. And then within these shimmer shades, my absolute favorite one is this like minty kind of green shimmer shade right here. And again, within the picture, what you're going to see is I have the little mint squad from Juvia's Place, and the minty green shimmer within that palette perfectly matches this one. So all of the shadows that I want to reach for from within this palette, I have duped out perfectly. I don't feel the need to keep hanging on to this. This palette still has a lot of life to give. Like it could still make someone very happy. So then kind of along the same vein, we have the Warrior 3 palette. This is a really pretty rainbow palette. It only has 2 shimmers, which I'm okay with. I don't mind that. My more favorite shimmer is this one right here, the more like gray blue shimmer. So if I pop up the picture for you, I can perfectly dupe this palette out with the Glam Light Cake palette that Laura sent me. And I much more prefer the formula of the Glam Light palette than Juvia's Place. So it's a dead winner right there. Now, not every shadow, you know, swatched out and was like a perfect spot on dupe, but I can get just the same vibe. You know what I mean? Like the green shadow from the Glam Light palette is much more of a limey green, whereas this one is much more of like a primary green, but that's okay with me. I'm much more likely to use the lime green than the primary green. And then for this like silvery shade down in the center that I really like, the shimmer shade, there is a shadow from one of my BH Cosmetics Birthstone palettes. I can't remember exactly. I think it might be the Sapphire palette, but it has like a really pretty intense kind of blue-gray shimmer within that palette. So again, I have duped out all of the colors in here that I would want to like use and work with, and there's no point in hanging on to it when I'm going to reach for the BH Cosmetics palette and the Glam Light Cake palette over the Warrior 3. Okay, so one more palette to declutter, and then we will get into the ones that are on the chopping block. So this is the Jeffree Star Thirsty palette. This is one of his summer releases. I don't remember which one. This is what it looks like. This is a pretty palette. Like, I have to give you that. Like, the color story is very nice in here. This is a lot of pastels, and we know how I feel about pastels. And I have to say, I have my BH Cosmetics Lost in Los Angeles palette, and I have the Juvia's Place The Mint Squad, and I'm sure that if I look at a palette individually, I'll find some pastel shades like sprinkled throughout them. What I'm trying to get at is I have enough pastel shadows for someone who doesn't like to do full-on pastel looks. And the big draw of this palette for me was this center row of shimmer shades. Like, they just look so pretty, so like fun, but they're not. They're like chunky, and I didn't like the way that they wore. They kind of like looked crepey on my eyelids, like, and they started to like cause some creasing and things like that. And I don't experience that problem with any other palettes using the eyeshadow primers and my techniques and things like that. So I really do think that it is the formula of this palette. Like, it just does not play well with like my preferences or things that I want out of my makeup, and especially out of my shimmer shades. So even though this was a gift and it was a very thoughtful gift, if I am not going to reach for it, then what is the point of, again, it just sitting here in my collection to rot? So I'm gonna let go of this one as well. Okay, so then 3 more palettes that are just, they're on the chopping block. Like, for one reason or another, like, I hesitate to declutter them. So I just want to give myself like the permission to kind of like really play around with them, kind of test them out and form some like better thoughts and opinions on them. So we'll just keep on the J Star train. This is the Mini Controversy palette. This is a 9-pan palette, and I have greatly fallen in love with 9-pan palettes. Like, I feel like this is the sweet spot. Like, you get a variety, but you can do, like, it's just fun. You know what I mean? Like, 9 pans, they offer more than what you would think just 9-pan eyeshadows would offer. So the color story of this has always like drawn me in. Like, it's really interesting. It's kind of chaotic. It's like a hodgepodge. Like, you've got purple, green, brown, blue, and I really think that objectively it's pretty. But every time that I like go to pull it out and play with it, something in my brain just like stops me from playing with it. I don't know if it's the fact that it's his palette. Like, I don't know what it is. Again, this one was gifted to me, so I try to look at this more as like this was a very thoughtful, you know, gifted palette, as opposed to like whose palette it actually is. So I don't know if that's my hang up, or if that it is just at the end of the day like a little too chaotic for my brain to come up with color combinations. But yeah, I definitely want to sit down and give myself like the permission, like I said, just to test this palette out, really see if I like it, if it deserves a spot like within my collection. Okay, so the next one, this is from Beauty Bakery. So they have a line with Target. Yeah, it's with Target, where they'll put out products. So for the holidays, they came out with 2 eyeshadow palettes. This one is the I'm With the Cookie Baking Crew palette. So if I open this one up for you, this is really pretty. Like, I like that for a holiday palette, this is not a standard like gold, green, red type palette that you would see like around Christmas time. Like, it's blue, red, and brown. Like, it's more interesting, I feel like. However, I have used this 2, 3, something like that, like over 2 times. And every time I dip into this, it's a very dry formula. It's like those Juvia's Place palettes. The shimmers in here are a bit better than the ones from the Juvia's Place palettes, but the mattes are super dry. I just don't really have a lot of fun with this palette when I work with it. Like, it takes longer than I want to like finesse these shadows and get them to where I want to be. Also, I find that sometimes when I try to come to this palette and create a full-on look and I want to deepen up my outer V, I really can't accomplish that. Like, a lot of the deep shades in here, like this red and then this brown here, they might look different on camera, but the depth of them is the same. So you really can't use one to deepen up the outer V, or like layering them has been really tricky. So I don't know if this palette is something that will actually stay in my collection. There's no like spectacular shadow or like shade from in this palette where it's like, oh, but I'll keep it for that one because I really love it. You know what I mean? So I'm just gonna play with it and see what I feel. This next one is from Juvia's Place. It's the Saharan palette, and I know this is a lot of people's favorite, but for whatever reason, when I use this palette, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I come in here for 2 shades and 2 shades only. Kia and Wodabi. That's it. So I need to really test this out, really force myself to try and come up with some full-on looks using this eyeshadow palette. See if I maybe just wanted to pot those 2 shadows or pass this palette on in its entirety, because I do have to say, Wodabi and Kia are not like unique to in my collection. I feel like both of those shades you can get the same vibes with as from 2 of the shadows within the Tribe palette, and I like the Tribe palette a lot more. So again, this is just going to come down to playing around with this and actually deciding if it has a place in my collection or not. But that's it. That is all the palettes that I'm either, 1, throwing in the bin because unfortunately they expired, 2, decluttering and passing on to someone within my life, and the third category is I have 3 palettes where I just want to take some time and really play around with them. So hopefully you enjoyed this style of video. I know it's a little bit different of a like declutter than what most people do, but this is how I like to do my declutters. That way I can really make thoughtful decisions and they're not like spur of the moment and then you regret something later. So that is it. That is all I have for you guys. I hope you're having a good day, a good night, or a good whatever, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.